What's going on, everybody? It is Overreaction Time once again. I'm your host, Simon Samano, and look who I got with me for this week of ORT. It is none other than the fabulous Farah Hannoun. Farah, what's good? How you doing?
I'm doing great, thank you. How about yourself?
I'm doing good. I'm doing real good. I mean, we have a lot to talk about coming out of a week where we had quite the news dump, quite the fight booking dump, so I couldn't think of anybody else better to have for such a big episode than you. You ready to get this thing going?
Let's get the ball rolling.
Let's get it rolling. All right. You know what time it is, Kamikaze. Hit it.
I mean, guys, what are you fucking? Is this tonight's stupid question night? Are you guys that fucking stupid? You can't be that fucking stupid. Who gives a shit? One of the dumbest things I've ever read in my life. Fucking common sense. Everybody knows that.
All right, Farah, here we go. As I mentioned, we had a Dana news dump last week, all right, with a lot of fight announcements. And I'm going to start at the very top with nothing bigger than UFC 317. We finally have an International Fight Week main event. It is going to be for the vacant lightweight title between former champ Charles Oliveira and Ilia Topuria, former featherweight champ, who is making his debut at 155 pounds. Great fight, admittedly, an awesome fight. Not exactly what we were expecting. But we end up with a pretty good fight nonetheless. But still, Farah, when I think to what UFC 317 could have been, I have to hit you with this, that in the end, UFC 317 is completely underwhelming.
Look, I can't say that's an overreaction just because simply I don't think too many people thought that Belal was going to lose to Jack Dilla. So maybe most of us were hopeful that we were going to get Islam versus Ilia. Now, I know a lot of people accused Islam of ducking Ilia and the fight wasn't going to happen. Mike Bond did an interview with Ali Abdelaziz and he said, look, if Belal had retained his title, Islam versus Ilia would have been next. And it was clear, even Dana said it, like we were just all waiting to see what will pan out with Belal and Jack Dilla. But most people thought Belal was going to beat Jack Dilla. That's just the reality of it. So I think it kind of threw a curveball, and all of a sudden we kind of faced the reality that we're not going to get Islam versus Ilia. Now, look, I've been very advocate in terms of, like, I've been advocating for Islam to stay at lightweight and defend his belt. That's what I wanted to see. Yeah, I've said it time and time again, reiterated it. I said I want to see a champion just run through the entire division. I understand where Islam's coming from, that he wants to chase a second belt. He did have to vacate. Now, it's always tricky with the way we phrase it, right? Opted, forced, I don't know, but he vacated.
Whatever it is.
Whatever it is, he vacated. And, Ali Abdelaziz says, well, he's going to hold both belts. I guess it's the visual, it's the marketing, it's the promotion. I get it. I understand why Islam wants to do it. I'm not necessarily like blaming him or accusing him of ducking Ilia. I just would have wanted him to stay at 55. And if Ilia was the next guy, I was saying rebook Arman, just go that route, but I think a lot of people are going to disagree with me. But you know what? At the end of the day, we're not going to get the fight. I don't think we're ever going to get the fight, which is disappointing. What's going to happen with Ilia and Charles? What's going to happen with Ilia moving forward? If Ilia keeps going like this, it's going to make people angrier and angrier that we never got to see the fight, right? But I don't think
we're never going to see the fight. You just said we're never going to see the fight. This is going to be our modern day GSP Anderson Silva is what you're telling me.
Or you mean Jones?
Not saying it's the same level, but a modern day GSP Anderson Silva, and we're never going to see it. Is what you're telling me.
Or maybe a modern day Jones and Aspinall. You never know.
Oh my goodness, Farah, stop it, okay? That which leads me into what I was going to say also, okay, about UFC 317. Listen, I want to say this. I want to be clear. Ilia versus Charles is a hell of a fight. It is a absolutely great consolation, but let's take this a step further, though, Farah, because UFC 317, as you know, as I've talked with you about this on this program, International Fight Week is supposed to be amazing. It's supposed to be great, man. Like I have said, let's make International Fight Week great again, and let's consider what our options were, what we thought the options could be at the start of the year or just a few months ago. We thought we could get Ilia Charles. We thought we could get Tom Aspinall, John Jones. We thought we could get DDP-Khamzat Chimaev. We're getting none of them. Not a single one of those fights is happening on this card, Farah. We thought we could get at least one, maybe two of them. And now look what we have. We've got Ilia Topuria and Charles Oliveira. Nice consolation. Okay, we've got a nice flyweight title co-main event between Alexandre Pantoja and Kai Kara-France. I'm not going to complain about that fight. It's nice. But what's after that, Farah? Paulo Costa, Roman Kopylov, Beneil Dariush, Renato Moicano, which is a fun fight. Yonana Denise, Justin Tafa. Brandon Royval, Manel Kopp, which is looking like it's going to be a prelim. crazy enough. Jack Hermanson, Gregory Rodriguez, and then Vivian Araujo and Tracy Cortez. What of those fights really screams big fight feels?
No. I agree. I would have loved to see DDP and Khamzat on that. I think that's the direction they should have gone. But obviously, we don't know what the reasoning is, if those guys were going to be ready by June 28 or whatever. But yeah, I think that fight, just because everybody's been so eager to see Khamzat Chimaev finally get a title fight or get a title shot, that fight I actually would have preferred that as a headliner over Ilia and Charles, actually. But yeah, I get what you mean. International Fight Week is supposed to scream kind of the biggest card of the year. But let's be real. Last couple of years, it hasn't really been like that.
It hasn't been.
Yeah. The cards that are supposed to be the biggest aren't necessarily the biggest. So it's just a matter of who's ready. But relying on the UFC's quote-unquote biggest stars, the John Joneses, the Conor McGregor stuff, you're not going to get anywhere doing that. If you're relying on those guys to headline International Fight Week, you're not going to get anywhere.
All right, well, maybe next year we'll make International Fight Week great again. We'll find out. We'll see. Okay, so now let's zero in, Farah, okay, on the UFC 317 main event because, the odds for the UFC 317 main event, we've got Ilia Topuria minus 345 favorite with Charles Oliveira as a plus 275 underdog. That's according to DraftKings. Farah, the Ilia Topuria-Charles Oliveira opening odds are absolutely ridiculous.
Look, I'll say this. I can understand why they are the way they are, and I think the line will probably get a little bit tighter as we get closer to the date. But when you think about it this way, Charles Oliveira, the way he fights, he's constantly underestimated. I get it. He's always dropped. He's always hurt. And Ilia Topuria has power in his hands. He just became the first man to knock out Max Holloway. I'm very high personally on Ilia Topuria. I've only picked against him once against Alexander Volkanovski. Granted, I said I'm never going to pick against him. So maybe that's how great, no pun intended, I thought Alexander Volkanovski is. And he is great. But, he even surprised me there. And then going and doing what he did against Max Holloway, how well-rounded Ilia Topuria is as well. But I think the question marks are around the size. I think he's not going to realize how big Charles Oliveira is once they square up and once they do those things. But yeah, it is disrespectful to Charles Oliveira, 100%. Considering the resume he has, the guys he's beaten, the fashion that he's beaten them in, it is disrespectful. But in terms of how Charles's fights pan out and what Ilia Topuria can do in the octagon, I don't think it's that crazy. That's fair.
But more than 3-1, a more than 3-1 favorite. Do you know how that's wide, Farah? That is wide. A more than 3-1 favorite against a guy like Charles Oliveira, who's proven to be durable. He's shaken that quitter, that quitter image that he had from a couple years ago. He's completely shaken that. This is a guy who has dropped Michael Chandler. This is a guy who has dropped Justin Gaethje and finished him. This is a guy who has shown that his hands, I don't want to say that they're necessarily as good as Ilia Topuria's, but like they're definitely in the ballpark, are they not? Like a more than 3-1 favorite, just crazy to me.
Yeah, and look, this sport is a what have you done for me lately? I think people looking at Charles Oliveira not being able to finish Michael Chandler, going 5 rounds, and then seeing how Chandler and Paddy Pimblett panned out versus what Ilia did back-to-back with Max Holloway and Alexander Volkanovski. I know it doesn't always work like that, but that's kind of how the odds work.
You just did some MMA math. The odds maker just did MMA math.
It is what have you done lately for me type of sport. We've seen it time and time again. That's how we base our picks, whether we like it or not. That's kind of the direction we start going. We don't really remember what's been done in the past. It's kind of like the Gilbert Burns and Michael Morales fight that just happened. It's kind of that. You look at Burns' resume, his well-rounded skills and whatnot. You would say stylistically he should give him problems, but then you go, okay, aging veteran versus young prospect on a tear who finishes everybody. The odds were very lopsided for that one.
Yeah. All right. Well, I think it's nuts. But hey, listen. For all we know, Ilia Topuria, who's just knocked out Volkanovski and Max Holloway, for all we know, he's going to do it in the first round again. He might do it in the first round against Charles. Who knows? But I don't see that happening. Don't underestimate Chucky Olives, all right? Now, let's move on. Let's move on here, Farah. Okay. Now, as part of the Dana announcement last week, we are going to get Dricus du Plessis against Khamzat Chimaev. It is going to headline UFC 319. That is happening on August 16th in Chicago. Now, those opening odds are also out, Farah, and we've got Khamzat Chimaev, the challenger, minus 198 favorite, and DDP at plus 164 as the underdog, according to DraftKings. And Farah, I'm just going to hit you with this. The DDP Khamzat Chimaev opening odds are completely disrespectful to the champ.
Okay, disrespectful, yes. So you're not overreacting there. But you're talking
But
the
they're
wrong
crazy.
yes, look, you're talking the wrong person. I've been high on Khamzat Chimaev ages ago. Him and Ilia are like a special thing for me because I've covered them pre-UFC, so I've always known how good they're going to be. So maybe in this sense, you're going to talk to the wrong person, and maybe people are going to be like, yeah, I'm kind of siding with them because of that. But at least he's not as big of a favorite as Ilia is over Charles Oliveira. But yeah, obviously,
almost 2-1, almost 2-1, basically a 2-1 favorite.
Look, you have to call it disrespectful to DDP because DDP's been winning. He's been doing nothing but winning since entering the UFC. And yes, he might not look the prettiest when he does it. I don't think he ever will look the prettiest while doing it. But considering, I will say this, because when you take this matchup versus Ilia and Charles, Ilia doesn't have those gas tank questions. He's gone the 5 rounds. He's done all that, I guess, with Josh Emmett and stuff, even though it was one-way traffic in that regard. But with Khamzat, there are a lot of question marks. There's been a lot of inactivity in between. So yes, in that regard, you can say it's disrespectful because we're basing it off of what Khamzat has been doing, and that's when he's the hammer, he's friggin' unstoppable. And whereas Dricus du Plessis, I guess we constantly underestimate, maybe not in the Sean Strickland fights, but just in general throughout his UFC career. Is it disrespectful? Absolutely. And I think Dricus especially is going to be that guy that people continuously disrespect. It's just his fighting style is so crazy. But I will say this, Dricus is a fighter. That's what he is best at. He's a real fighter. It's not necessarily, if you break down his skills, striking skills, grappling skills, submission skills, you could probably give the advantage to Khamzat. Khamzat will look prettier. Granted, maybe he's not even the most technical, but Dricus is a fighter, and I think that's what's going to come down to. But am I wildly surprised by the odds? No, I'm not, because look at what Khamzat's been doing in the cage.
Yeah, but Farah, also, listen, okay, you talk about what Khamzat's been doing in the cage. Dare I say, we just talked about how this style, right? And DDP, when these fights go long, when they go 5 rounds, when he's been past into the championship rounds, he gets stronger and stronger. What have we seen from Khamzat Chimaev in those fights that have gone deeper into deep waters? We've seen him fade. We've seen him escape, right? We saw it against Kamaru Usman in the last fight. And that was a Kamaru Usman who was just taking that fight on a week's notice, making his welterweight, his middleweight debut, right? This guy, DDP, much bigger than Kamaru Usman. We agree there. So let's pay attention to that. We've seen it against Gilbert Burns a couple years ago when that fight went into deep waters and how that fight almost went sideways for Khamzat. All I'm saying is that when you factor in Dricus' size, okay, and how durable he is, if you don't get, I know we say this a lot about Chimaev, but if you don't get the finish, if he doesn't get the finish in the first or second round, and we go into those championship rounds or even the third, I don't know, the tides are going to turn, I think, in this fight. That's why I'm just surprised that he's even the underdog to begin with. I'm surprised by that.
Yeah, no, these are all fair points. And I think if Dricus does survive kind of the early barrage from Khamzat Chimaev and drags him into the latter rounds and either wins a decision, so I don't think anyone's going to be shocked, put it that way. I think whereas with Ilia, not to keep bringing up Ilia and Charles, I think Ilia losing, period, is going to shock people more than Khamzat losing in that fashion. Unless Dricus comes out and finishes him early, then that will shock everybody. But if Dricus survives or weathers an early storm, like gets his back taken, gets back up, and then Khamzat tires throughout the rounds and he wins a decision or whatever, I don't think it's going to shock people as much as Ilia, just because there's, like you said, what we've seen from Khamzat when the fight drags out hasn't been the most encouraging thing. But I think in terms of the odds and how I've noticed the odds working, undefeated, dominant, finishes, kills everybody, yada, 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 you're going to make him the favorite, regardless. And same thing for Ilia. Yeah. No, I'm not. It's disrespectful. 100% disrespectful to DDP. I'm not saying it's not. Because the guy is...
It's also...
The guy's a fighter.
He's proven it. He's a fighter. He's proven it. I mean,
he's a real fighter.
The deep waters with Sean Strickland only getting stronger. Even got into the 4th round when he finished Adesanya. You know, guy just gets stronger as this fight goes on. If this fight goes on longer than 2 rounds, Chimaev could be in trouble. That's all I'm saying. He's going to get pushed. He's going to get pushed to the limits.
Oh, no, I don't disagree. Look, me calling him a real fighter is the biggest compliment I can give him, because at the end of the day, that's what matters, right? Technique goes out of the window when you're gassed out and all that stuff. So, yeah, no, I'm aware. I'm aware.
Nate Diaz appreciates that real fighter comment. He appreciates that compliment.
Yeah.
I bet you he agrees.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, Farah. All right, let's move on now, okay? And let's talk about some news from last week, because last week we had a huge major news with Patchy Mix, the former Bellator champion, now former Bellator champion, who was released by the PFL and then subsequently, rather quickly, I think within a couple days, or maybe it was longer than a couple days, but he got scooped up by the UFC, and he is now going to make his UFC debut in just a few weeks against Mario Bautista at UFC 315. Now, we'll talk about Patchy, okay? But right now, I've sort of been biting my tongue on this situation as it has unfolded with the PFL, Farah, because I just have. But this is the time now where I think I have to let this out. And I'm just going to go ahead and hit you with this one, Farah. And I hate to say it. I always hate to say this. But let me hit you with it. The PFL's acquisition of Bellator somehow has been worse for MMA.
Yeah. Oh, 100%. Because now look what's happening. Like, all the top stars, and I wouldn't be surprised if Dakota Dicheva and the rest of them followed suit. They want to be in the UFC. Back before, they were happy where they were at. They were justifying where they were at, whether the paychecks or the opportunities or whatnot. I don't know what they felt deep down inside, but at least they continued fighting. Yeah, publicly. And they continued fighting, and they continued getting big fights. But the inactivity, being in limbo, not feeling like they're kind of losing their identity a little bit in the process, has kind of just made I mean, I talked to Patchy when he was in Abu Dhabi grappling, and yeah, he didn't want to say much because he's kind of like a respectful guy. Like, he's not someone that's going to trash the company and stuff like that. But he was just eager to fight, eager to prove that he's the best bantamweight. We hear that all the time. He's at Extreme Couture. He's in Vegas, sparring Merab and stuff. He knows where he stands against these elite bantamweights, and he's always wanted to prove he's the best. But people always have that narrative that if you're not in the UFC, you can't call yourself number one. But after everything...
Which is BS in this regard.
Yeah. But after PFL acquired Bellator, and then they just didn't know where they were at or who they were going to fight. Is it tournaments? Is it showcase fights? It's a lot of miscommunication and no clarity. Then it's like everybody wanted to jump to the UFC, and they felt comfortable doing it. They no longer felt any loyalty to the brand. So, 100%, I agree. I think it's been a bunch of unknowns. Haven't really captured or gauged our interest in terms of... It became more of us sympathizing with them and wanting them to get out of the situation they were in, rather than us just wanting to see them compete, if that makes sense. So, 100% they messed up. I think before we had different shows, big fights. Like, sometimes we'd have weekends where it'd be like, oh, the Bellator card is more interesting than
better than the UFC card, right?
Yeah. But that kind of all went out the window, unfortunately.
Yeah, I mean, I think back to roughly 18 months ago when the acquisition happened, and how much optimism, at least I'll speak for myself, how much optimism I had. Like, wow, PFL is acquiring all this quality Bellator talent and all these, guys and girls with potential stardom. Like, they have the potential. Scott Coker, to his credit, built quite a few fighters from scratch himself, before they decided to pull the plug on Bellator, and then the PFL the merger happened. I think back to how optimistic I was and how great it was going to be that there would be a strong number 2 that would actually push the UFC, right? And how did we get here 18 months later where it actually feels like they're worse?
Yeah.
Like, and it creates these conditions. Why I say this is worse for MMA, Farah, it creates these conditions for, number one, the fighters, because now it's UFC or bust. And if you don't have a prime number 2, then how are they going to be able to even negotiate or elevate their pay, right? Like, if you don't have a prime number 2 option and it's really, truly only UFC, then that's not good for fighter pay, number one, because there's nothing to compete with. And number 2, from a fan perspective, The fans need a number 2 promotion to push the UFC. Because look at what we're getting on a regular basis, right? I've said it before. Look at what the UFC is giving us. It's Apex cards after Apex card and fight nights, and they're content farming, right? They're not like they're just filling spots in a schedule, and so without a number 2, there's no motivation for the UFC to change. I said this to Matt Wells in our chat. I said, hey, back when pro wrestling was at its best, was during the Attitude Era and WCW was pushing WWF and the Monday Night Wars. That's when pro wrestling was truly at its best. I at least hope there would be a little bit of that once, a semblance of that, and maybe it could grow once PFL acquired Bellator. But I just can't believe we're at the spot that we're at now.
The issue is, unless you're a European fighter, unless you're like a Paul Hughes that could sell out Ireland, or Northern Ireland, Belfast, Dublin, whatever, unless you're a Dakota Ditriva, unless you're Cedric Doumbé, unless you're that's when you can thrive at PFL. But let me tell you this: UFC's last trip to Paris may have not been their strongest card. They may have not had Cyril Gane or Manon Fiorot. They had a Benoit Saint-Denis, unfortunately, suffering a lopsided defeat to Renato Moicano, but they still sell out anyway. Without Cyril Gane, without Manon Fiorot. So that's the thing. The UFC is not worried about that. The UFC is not worried about, they're doing more European shows than we are. But at least if you're a European fighter and maybe you're not like absolutely elite, at least you can get a big spotlight being with PFL, because that's where their strength lies. Selling out those Paris shows, or even going in different European cities that the UFC haven't visited before. Like, when's the last time the UFC's been to Ireland, right? So so I guess for the Patchy mixes, the Johnny Eblins, those guys, like for them, it's a little bit tougher of a situation than it would be for the European fighters.
Yeah, it's crazy how in the last 18 months since this merger, we thought we were going to get a great number 2, and really only the UFC has gotten stronger as a result of it, because of all the discontent, right? Michael Page is there because of the merger. Pitbull is there because of the merger. Aaron Pico is in the UFC now because of the merger, and now Patchy Mix. I mean, just think of those 4 names that I just mentioned. That's wild. Those are Scott Coker built Bellator guys, and they are now all fighting for the UFC. That's crazy to me. It's just wild. I can't believe it got to this point. I really hope the PFL figures this out. I really do. It's not looking good at the moment, but believe me, I hope they figure this out, because we need a strong number 2 to push the UFC and to create a better product overall, a better sport. If we don't have that, the sport's going to be in trouble, I think. So anyways, that's where I'm at, Farah. Okay, well, now let's go to the last thing I want to talk about, Farah, which is playing off of what I just mentioned, that Patchy Mix is now in the UFC. He's going to fight Mario Bautista in just, 2 weeks, 3 weeks at UFC 315, right? In about 3 weeks at UFC 315. Yep. I'm just going to go ahead and say this, Farah, because I think Patchy Mix is a great fighter. I think he's at one point had a case to be the best bantamweight in the world, and he may still have that case. Okay. But let me go ahead and hit you with this. I just think that Patchy Mix, he deserved better for his UFC debut. I'm disappointed by this debut for Patchy Mix.
Look, short notice against Mario Bautista, it's risky. It's risky because you lose to Mario Bautista. At least for Pitbull, it was against Yair Rodriguez, former interim champion, former title challenger. At least in that regard, Yair.
It was a bigger fight. Yeah, it was a much bigger fight. It was a fight that if Pitbull had won, he probably would be in that title mix.
Yes,
immediately. I don't know what this does for Patchy Mix.
Agreed. Unless, other than being like a fan favorite, because Mario Bautista seems to be on everyone's hit list, whether you're a fighter or not. But I guess the angle of him avenging it for Jose Aldo would work. So I think if he can go out there and finish Mario Bautista, then probably get a lot of fans out of it. But very risky fight for him, because Mario Bautista is good, like him or not. Whether you want to complain about his performance against Jose Aldo, he's a very good fighter and he's skilled. So you lose to Mario Bautista, that's not going to put you in a very good spot.
No, we know when that'll answer the question. Then we'll know Patchy Mix is not that dude if he can't win. But still, I guess what I'm saying is he shouldn't be in this position in the first place. This guy's a former Bellator champion, 21-1. He's fought the who's who of that promotion. He's had some impressive wins. Why? This is what I'm talking about. This goes off of like what we were just talking about. The UFC should be making a big deal out of Patchy Mix coming to the UFC, right? They should be making a big deal. He got announced during an Apex card this past Saturday.
Well,
It's like, yeah, we signed Patchy Mix, and yeah, he's gonna fight in 3 weeks, dude. You just got one of the best bantamweights in the world who really bolsters your roster. Like, make a bigger deal out of this. Instead, he's gonna fight on short notice. Well, yeah, because he wants out because of what just happened.
That's what I'm going to say, because he's that confident that he's the best. He's reiterated it from any interview I've done with him, or he's done with Junkie Radio and stuff. He keeps reiterating, like, I'm the best 135-pounder. That's how confident he is, that he doesn't even care that this is short notice in a risky fight against a guy who's good that maybe doesn't have a massive name. But it goes back to what you said. He's eager to fight. I think he's just fed up of waiting. Like, he doesn't... Yeah, sure, you look at the rankings and the names and the division and stuff, he could have gotten something better. Heck, if he even fought Chito Vera when he recovered, that would have been a better fight for him, because at least Chito...
Yes, 100%.
Yeah, but for him, he's that eager to compete, and that he was left in like a situation of the unknown, and he's seen other guys get their problems solved before him, the Aaron Picos, Pitbull. It was just like he wants to fight. He's chomping at the bit to fight. Like, he's at the gym seeing a lot of other guys get fights booked, that an opportunity came up and he said, I'll take it.
So you think it's more on him? You think it's more on him that he
I'll have to ask him that myself, but I think he's that confident that he doesn't care that the circumstances aren't ideal. Like, I don't think he even cares to sit back. Like, he's a chill dude. Like, he's a guy who's just, he's confident, but he's not that kind of guy that will be like demanding crazy stuff. I just think for him, he's like, you know what? Yeah, sign me up. Like, someone pay-per-view main card. Like, look, if he goes out there and he runs through Mario Batista, considering the narrative I just said of people not being Batista's biggest fan, it's a pay-per-view main card. The narrative could change completely from what we're saying, but it's a risky fight. That's all I'm going to say. As in, like, he needs to look very good. And he's a finisher. Look, Patchy Mix, most of the times when he wins, he'll finish you. But if he doesn't go out there and finish Mario Batista, I think everything he's been saying about being the best and all that stuff, it's going to harm him. That's what I'm going to say. But
no, for sure. Yeah. We'll see what happens. I mean, I just wish he didn't have to win this fight under these circumstances on short notice to get the fight that I think we should already be getting. He should already be fighting like a Petr Yan or Umar Nurmagomedov or a Corey Sandhagen. He should be. All three of those guys are unbooked right now. They're all available. So, like, that's really, to me, that's already the matchup. One of those matchups would be vastly superior to this, and it would be the one that I would want to see above this. You know, that's the one that makes more sense. The fact that he has to win this first one to probably get it, I just think he deserved better than that. That's why I just think he deserved better.
I agree, but we don't know if those guys would have accepted it. Yair accepted Pitbull, but we don't know if maybe they would have looked at Patchy as a very high risk, low reward fight for them. You know, those top contenders you just mentioned. So who knows? I guess. I don't know. I think they have respect for. I would think that they would have respect on a level for Patchy Mix, where they're like, oh, this dude's coming in. Like, this is a good opportunity for me as well. That's got to be how Yair looked at the Pitbull opportunity, right? Like, you know, this is. But Yair was in a spot where, you know, he had that loss to Brian Ortega where it's like he beat him the first time and then he ended up getting finished by Brian Ortega, whereas Corey Sandhagen feels that he should get a title fight. So tell Corey Sandhagen to fight Patchy Mix. He's going to be like, well, what do I gain out of this? If I beat him, people are going to be like, well,
that makes sense.
A lot of people tout me as a future champion. I should beat him.
But
if he loses to Patchy Mix, where does that put Corey Sandhagen?
Yeah, I don't know.
Petr Yan wants a title fight as well. So
they all want title fights.
True.
So,
but Sean O'Malley gets it.
Yeah, but Farah, let's not finish with mentioning Sean O'Malley, okay? We'll talk about him in a couple weeks, I'm sure, on Overreaction Time. All right.
Okay.
All right, Farah. Well, the time for overreacting has come to an end. Thank you for being on the show. I appreciate you very much.
Thank you for having me. I actually agreed to disagree, kind of. That was the theme today. So, yeah.
It was a little bit of an agree to disagree. Yeah, and I like that. So, yeah, we'll do it again soon, Farah, all right?
Well,
and for everybody watching, I appreciate you guys for tuning in. Until next time, we will see you on Overreaction Time. Dana, take us away.
MMA Junkie AI.